I would also do some kind of a daily undulating periodization type of scheme.
Okay.
Like this is what I have in fortitude training. So that means you train one way with a certain rep range or a certain general approach on certain days of the week, and then you periodize your type of training so it's undulating. So what this would probably be in this scenario I'm kind of painting now as a possibility is heavier training, like straight sets. But there's some things you can do to mix those up a little bit on those first 3 days. So the legs push-pull will be straight sets. And then on Friday and Saturday, when you're doing just an upper-lower, you could use some intensification techniques. So those are going to, because you've got more muscle to train on the upper-lower split versus the three-way split, you're going to be able, you can condense your training time by doing drop sets or cluster sets or doing pump sets like I have them in fortitude training, where you would extend the set with what I've been calling more effective time under tension. So do reps until you're getting close to failure, but then do partials so you can extend that time during the set when you're really pushing and you quote unquote have effective time under tension.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally, and all of our programming is brought to you by Scott's book. Check out BYOBBcoach.com. Be your own bodybuilding coach. You can get the hardcover. Right now, normally you can get it through Amazon, or Scott has another site, but I'm going to suggest that you get it directly through Scott. He has a bunch of them set up on eBay, where if you buy the book through him on eBay, you get your best pricing, plus you'll get an autographed copy. Scott will autograph it for you, sign it to you, whatever you want him to say. And of course, we are brought to you by supplementsource.ca for Canadians. They have great deals that change week to week, and in truenutrition.com. Use our code THINK over there. In fact, I have to place a new order for my True Nutrition. I just realized that this morning. High quality, third-party tested supplements, and it's a company that I've believed in for like the past 15, 20 years. I'm grateful that they work with us. I'm grateful that we can offer to you guys, a small discount on a product that I highly believe in. So Scott, we tried this before. We might have like an extra additional segment at the end of the show that's just like an additional 10-minute piece. We'll see how it turned out. But instead of going back into that and trying to rehash it, we had a bunch of listener questions, and you guys are welcome to leave us questions for the next episode. I thought this one was freaking awesome, man. We'll just jump straight into it if that's all right by you. It says, and I think this was from the Facebook group.
Yeah, you sent it to me, so I'm not sure where you got it, actually.
I think that's where it came from.
Okay.
He had said, if you only had 40 minutes to train, what would your workout be? Something along those lines.
Yeah, if someone only had 40 minutes to spend in the gym 5 times a week, what advice would you give? So, an important thing that's not indicated here is which days of the week. That makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So, someone could do Monday, Wednesday, Friday during the week, or Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or Monday. They could do all sorts of things, and then train both Saturday and Sunday. That's a lot of times 5 times a week because they just want to train during their work week and then have the weekend off.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go split the middle here, and I'll talk about it in a second, and presume someone maybe does like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Friday, Saturday. So they have at least one weekend workout. The other thing, so I'll start. I have some notes here because there's lots of things that can be done. This is an awesome question. I think you thought so too.
Yeah, I do.
I would do weight training. They just said train. But I would do the weight training. Cardio, caloric expenditure can be had outside the gym. So just generally on the way to go about this, I would try to save as much time as possible. So do big movements where you can be sure you can get to the machine and move quickly through the warm-up. So this would be selectorized machine exercises if possible, even like a selectorized leg press.
Oh yeah.
You're not dragging plates around. You're just moving the pin. You can bang out a warm up really fast that way.
Yeah.
Let's say you're going to go to 200 pounds on something. You could do 80 for like 6, 120 for 6, 160 for 2, and then go right to and rest 30 seconds between potentially or a minute.
Yeah.
Dumbbells are you just move down the rack.
Yeah.
And you can do exercise. A lot of things. As long as you're not in the way, get out of the loading zone. So gym I used to go to, they had literally like yellow markings on the floor that said loading zone, like like you see outside a warehouse.
I've seen that.
Yeah, I was like, okay, this is really smart. But you can do dumbbell exercises right there. So bend over. Sometimes if you're at the heavy end, you can just do a single dumbbell row right there at the rack because you're not worried about no one else is going to grab the 100s or the 120s more than likely. So and then generally picking exercises where less weight would be needed. So you might do like belt squats if you have a belt squat, for instance. You can do those on Smith machines. You can do those with a landmine as opposed to back squats, that sort of stuff. And then pre-fatiguing can be useful as well. So this just makes sense for people who are stronger who would have to use more weight. So you would do, for instance, isolation exercises, quads, hamstrings, before you would go to leg presses or a squatting movement. So there's just the way you go about the exercise, choosing the exercises and doing them as much as you possibly can. Save yourself as much time, so you're not futzing around, moving weights around and changing weights and that sort of thing. I would consider trying to go. I mean, some people just want to train the bro split one time a week, but I would think about for the kind of average person. This sounds like this someone who maybe doesn't have. They don't have pro genetics, they're not dedicating their life to this, they're trying to get in and out and make it happen. I would consider doing something like a push-pull legs. So the first 3 days, that could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or it could be legs push-pull, and then Friday and Saturday would be upper-lower, or lower-upper, depending. So a smart way to do this would actually be legs push-pull. So legs on Monday. No one's training legs on Monday, right? You're going to get on the machines. Kind of depends on the important thing is picking the right time of day. That's another tip I have. So, if you go in the morning, it depends on when you can go. But legs are going to be probably best to train. And then to give your low back some rest so you can do heavy pulling movements, you do a legs push pull.
Yep.
And in that case, then you would go take a day off. And then Friday you would do a lower, and then you could do upper on Saturday. It's more fun to train upper body on the weekends where you sleep in and can maybe have more time. It still says 40 minutes, but
I'm getting your vibe. I like that idea.
Yeah, because then you're like that's the day when you're probably going to potentially be the most tired. You haven't had a day where you didn't work and could potentially rest. So upper body is just generally more motivating and less strenuous than lower body. So that's why I'm thinking lower. Legs, push, pull, and then day off. You get a day off before lower. That's nice. Lower and upper. Yeah. I would also do some kind of a daily undulating periodization type of scheme.
Okay.
Like this is what I have in fortitude training. So that means you train one way with a certain rep range or a certain general approach on certain days of the week, and then you periodize your type of training so it's undulating. So what this would probably be in this scenario I'm kind of painting now as a possibility is heavier training, like straight sets. But there's some things you can do to mix those up a little bit. On those first 3 days, so the legs push-pull will be straight sets. And then on Friday and Saturday, when you're doing just an upper-lower, you could use some intensification techniques. So those are going to, because you've got more muscle to train on the upper-lower split versus the three-way split, you're going to be able, you can condense your training time by doing drop sets or cluster sets or doing pump sets like I have them in fortitude training, where you would extend the set with what I've been calling more effective time under tension. So do reps until you're getting close to failure, but then do partials so you can extend that time during the set when you're really pushing and you quote unquote have effective time under tension. And then you can superset a lot of this stuff, especially if you picked the right day and time of day to train. So you can superset quad and hamstring, right? And just bang those out. You can superset biceps and triceps. You can superset delts and abs, or use calves and abs if you want to do abs on the day you train legs. You can superset thigh movements, so like a leg press, this is what I call it in fortitude training. So a quad hamstring adductor movement, so like a squatting movement or a leg press with doing glutes and or adductors. So your adductors, you can train adductors before you hit squats, and it won't really impose upon the load you use for the squats for most people. So you can get the glutes done right after, especially if you want to hit glutes. You could also pre-fatigue with that way, but you can do adductors right afterwards and just get them done. Just walk over and do it.
Right.
You can even do chest and back supersets. So the way I would suggest doing that, let's say you're going to do 2 different exercises on this heavy set day in your week. Or, let's take it back. I take that back. On the day where you're doing, on your upper day, so it should be like Saturday. So you would do a compound movement for the first muscle group and exercise, and then an isolation movement after that when you're psychologically, neurologically more fatigued. So that might be like you do a bent over row, and then you superset that. It doesn't have to be like you run immediately get there, and then you would go to a pec deck.
Okay.
So you can go back and forth with those things. So the nice thing about supersetting, of course, is that the rest is doing double time, assuming that you're cardiovascularly you're recovered. Mm-hmm. But you do the back work and the pec work, and then you rest 2 minutes or however long you happen to rest, and that rest serves for both the back and the pec to rest, as opposed to 2 minutes do back, rest 2 minutes, so you can come back and train heavier on those individual exercises with less rest time being used up.
You're getting me pumped right now, Scott. I'm thinking about doing this myself.
Yeah, so you could do like an incline machine press, let's say. So you've got a selectorized machine for saving, and then do like stretchers or a pullover. Like you get a dumbbell, or do like stretchers. Just grab whatever cable is available and do like in the John Meadows lat stretchers. So those are just a couple examples. So compound first when you've just had the rest and you can put more into it, and then isolation exercises are more or less neurologically challenging.
Yeah.
So some other things I wrote down here. So time of day and day of week, that's super huge for getting this done. You go at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, right? Then this is going to be very tough to do all this. Be clever with your warm-ups too. So one thing you can do is, let's say you're doing several sets and then you're going to move to another exercise. This is clever with getting the machine that you want as well as being warmed up. So let's say you've done 2 sets, or maybe you're doing supersetting and you got one more set. So let's say you're doing chest and back, and now you're going to go to delts, as an example. You would go over, let's say you use the side delt machine. You would go over and do your warm-up set during that rest interval, assuming you're not like very meticulously following your rest intervals. And now you've warmed up your delts, and neurologically you pick the exercise, you got the machine set up, you're good to go. Maybe add an extra minute to account for that. Then you do your final set for chest and back, or chest, whatever the preceding muscle group was. And then when you go over to train delts, you've already done a warm-up set. So you save some time there, right? And when you get done with chest and back, whatever you train, then you unload the weights, clean up your area, and you just walk right over. Your delts are already warmed up.
Yeah.
So like if you're doing like quads and hams, supersetting like that, and you want to get on the leg press, right? And there's one leg press you want to use, like the selectorized one. You're doing 2 or 3 sets of that quad ham superset. After your second one, you go over to the leg press, you drag your bag over there, you do a quick warm-up set, get the machine all set up, then you go do your last superset, and then you got the machine so no one snagged it from you, hopefully, or at least you know you're going to work in with somebody. So that's sort of that's a mindset that I've had kind of for years in the gym. It's like, okay, think ahead as to where you're going next, and if you need a warm up, let's say you're gonna, let's say it's calves. Like after you've done your leg training, you go over and you grab the standing calf machine or the seated calf press or whatever you're gonna do. You got the machine, you're starting the warm up, and then when you walk, you don't have to do a warm up and wait. You've already got the rest between your warm-ups taken care of because you've been multitasking. And the last thing I had, sorry for this, kind of a long little...
It's good though, I like it.
Yeah. An intro workout. So if you're like training in the morning, have that, you don't have much time. This might even give you more time to work out, but then you have... Your breakfast becomes your intra-workout. So you start drinking your pre-workout, you drink it during, and then when you're done, you don't have to have a meal because you've just had a large intra-workout or peri-workout recovery shake of some sort. You can do the same thing with dinner, right? It's your last meal that you're going to train after work, or maybe it's your lunch. Like some people go and they train during the lunch break. your lunch is going to be a liquid lunch. I mean, you could have a bar, or you could even have like a sandwich if you wanted to, right? But you're going to basically, this is the ultimate multitasking here, because you're having a meal during your workout, and that's going to help a lot, I think. And there's recovery reasons. That's a whole other topic unto itself. But so that's my last thought, is to manage your nutrition alongside of the training, so you're not squandering time with a meal outside the training.
That makes sense, especially if you're doing that first thing in the morning. That way, because that's the big thing, is guys are like, hey, I want to train first thing, but my problem is that I have to be to work at 8 a.m. and I have an hour drive, and that means I have to train at 5, and that means I have to get up at 3:30, to cook my food. And Yeah.
I mean, and some people train better when they're fasted. They feel okay that way. Some people don't like to be full, but you get used to that. You can kind of train your gut to some degree.
I agree.
And so that would be something you just slowly work your way into, so that you don't have to scramble for a breakfast, no pun intended, and you have that already taking place. So those, like, I think if you do all that, you can get it done. But you got to move, and you got to be thinking too, like, okay,
what you're doing when you
what exercises am I going to do? How am I going to superset them? Like, this is an issue with zigzagging in fortitude training, where it doesn't have to happen this way, but there's some reasons why you would do a compound exercise alternated with an isolation exercise.
Okay.
So let's say your quads are important. You want to pre-fatigue your quads, right? So you might do a quad exercise, a knee extension, let's say, before you do your squatting exercise. Because squats, because of your biomechanics, they end up being really glute intensive, and you want to get more quad activity or whatever exercises. So when you can do things, you can, like, for instance, you also do this zigzagging with back and chest. So you go back and forth, and not back and chest, but a width and a thickness exercise. So like a rowing exercise and a pull down exercise.
Okay.
So one thing you would do is you secure a rack, and you're going to do bent over barbell rows, and then you're going to do chins in there, right? Okay. Or if you're going to do a pressing exercise, an isolation exercise with a compound exercise for chest, you would get a rack or get a dumbbell, and you bring dumbbells over so you can do the barbell press, and then you can do dumbbells right after that. Yeah. So there's ways that you have to sort of think ahead of time to have, because if you're supersetting stuff or doing two exercises in a supersetted fashion, you're potentially commandeering two exercises at once.
Right.
But if you're smart about, like in the example of where you do like an incline press and then go to the stretchers with a cable, like, you can do those on anything, right? As long as there's some cable available. You could even do them with bands if you needed to.
True.
And that's not that big of a deal, right? And that's not like, I'm going to just get massively strong on stretchers, right? That's not an exercise. That tends to be a higher rep exercise. So you have to pay attention to setting up your exercise combos. And this is a smart thing even to lay out ahead of time. It's like, what am I going to do on these days? You may have a rotation, that you work through, so that you're not like trying to access two exercises for a superset that everyone wants to be on.
Yeah.
Right?
You figure the logistics out, I think, too, with that stuff over time. Like the first few times it might be a little clunky, and then you might make some changes, and by the time you're a month in, like, you know what works in your gym.
Right. And like if you're like doing, let's say, knee extensions, hamstring curls, and someone comes in, right, it's easy, but if someone comes in and like they start, it's like, hey, can I work in with you? Yeah. It's not. I mean, the supersetting, it's not like you're doing a drop set and you want to, you're paying attention to what your load and reps were on every single aspect of the drop set. You're just supersetting for the sake of saving time. So if you have to rest for a minute while you're waiting on somebody, it doesn't matter. It's no big deal. You just wait it out, and then you do your set, and then you work in with the person. And maybe you're slowed down. Yeah, so, you can make it happen. But you're just going your whole time when you're training like that. Yeah.
40 minutes in and out. All right, guys, let's talk about intra-workout carbs and saving money. So like the past 10, 15 years, intra-workouts become super popular. It's a great way to support pre-workout insulin use. It's great for recovery, and it's great for endurance in those long workouts. Here's the thing. It's really expensive. It's not only expensive for us, it's expensive for supplement companies. They really don't make a lot of money off of it. That's where True Nutrition comes in. So True Nutrition, they're not only a retailer, they're also a manufacturer. They're actually making a lot of the products that you guys are already buying from other companies. So just think about it. You're going to cut out the middleman. The only thing you're going to miss out on is the fancy labels and the branding. Outside of that, you're getting the exact same high quality products, but you're getting it directly from the source. If you're going to pay for the price of highly branched cyclic dextrin, ensure that you're getting 25 grams per scoop, not of a mix of carbs, but just of highly branched cyclic dextrin. We can mix the other stuff in later, Use our code THINK, get some savings. Plus, it's like voting for us. It lets them know that you support what we're doing. So we had a few more questions. I think this one may have come from Patreon. You often hear guys talk about saying that you should get plenty of sodium in your diet. But what is actually a good range of sodium to get?
Yeah, so the DRI, the recommended intake, is like a 1.5 grams of sodium per day. So sodium is not the same as sodium chloride salt. So 1.5 grams or 1,500 milligrams it's 3,750 milligrams of salt, sodium chloride. So if you're using sea salt, you have to read that too, because some other things in there. There's sort of an upper level of 2.3 grams of sodium, but you could need a lot more. Potentially if you're sweating and you're doing a lot of cardio in a hot environment. So you could even double that potentially. If you're a big person and you're outside, so you work outside, you're sweating all the time. There's a guy I know, I actually bought a trailer from him who does solar installations. And God, what did he tell me? He's like drinking like 2.5 gallons. He just drinks Gatorade too because he needs the calories.
Oh wow!
A day,
just
right?
the full throttle stuff with the sugar. Wow.
Yeah, but he's roaming. I mean, I think he's maybe changed. He was trying to drop some weight too. That's a whole other story. But he's just drinking massive amounts of fluid because he's down here in Florida and he's just sweating continuously. That just occurred to me right now. But go back and calculate. But I imagine he's taking a lot more and needs a lot more.
Yeah.
So your body will auto-regulate a lot of that. Like generally the thought is that after you've exercised and dehydrated because you exercised in the heat or it was prolonged exercise where you're sweating a good bit, that thirst isn't the best mechanism. Most people, when they allow them to just drink ad libitum after prolonged exercise like that, they won't quite bring their body weight back to where it once was.
Interesting.
Yeah. So your sodium sense of like, I want salty foods, you typically would get that. But those are some rough numbers. It can be much higher, and it's, you can't say per se. If you're someone who, lives up north and they hardly ever sweat and you don't do any endurance exercise, you like DC training and you just go walk out. It's in the cold, you're all bundled up, you're hardly sweating, right? And you like salty foods, you're probably getting plenty, right?
Yeah.
You can get water intoxication. But that's really rare. That happens during like endurance or ultra endurance events where people just drink water and don't replace sodium. So you lose some sodium in your sweat. This is hardly ever going to happen to a bodybuilder. So they end up drinking more and more water, and then they end up having quote unquote, they get hyponatremia. Their sodium levels are dangerously low, and they get quote unquote water intoxication. But that's hardly going to happen. Yeah. And then the one thing is that something like a third of people can be salt sensitive, so they'll end up with hypertension if they take in too much salt.
1/3 of people,
like 30%, yeah. I think is what. Yeah. So you just knowing that if you've got blood pressure issues potentially, some doctors just say you drop your salt just as a general recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah, it used to be a big thing back in the 80s. They're like, you got to watch your heart. Everybody eat low. And then because of that, my mom cooked all of our food without sodium in it, without salt. And it was so bland, just like baked chicken with pepper on it. That was it. That was it. Everything. Yeah. Pork chops with pepper on it. Yeah. That was it. I noticed, Scott, that I've had a couple instances where people were using too much salt going into a show, and I generally try to keep sodium high, but I don't want it to be incredibly high. And then in like all 3 cases, these guys were using like 10 grams of salt per day. Like, it was so much salt, and we couldn't get enough if you could get enough water in them, you could flush it. You know what I mean? But
Right.
it just wasn't enough. And after I saw it for the second, so the first guy was a competitor who was in really good shape, and he was doing junior nationals in men's physique. Always had like peeled conditioning, and this year he was a little bit bigger, so he was actually going to do that and also classic. He didn't get dry enough. It was one of those contest preps that haunts me to this day, like because we didn't freaking nail it, you know. But then in hindsight, talking about it, we figured out he was using way more salt than I thought he was using. So I've seen the look since, and UC Suma was doing this at one point, Matt Marshall, and he was up there too, about like 10 grams a day. And once we brought it back down, like thankfully then from there I can see it now. And after we're trying to look at all the variables, why do you look this way, we get to salt, and we were able to bring it back down. And then I had somebody do it last year, and it was just night and day, man. Night and day when you get them down to, you know, like 5-6 grams at the most.
He was probably losing a ton of water overnight. His probably body weight fluctuations were huge with that guy. Do you recall?
You know what it was? It was that even at his driest, he just looked kind of watery still.
Okay, so he was still taking in that much salt, like up into the show. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because normally I don't do a lot to manipulate salt, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, and
sure. That works out okay if you're absolutely peeled and drinking enough water.
Right.
And what I realized is that the more water you drink, the more salt you can handle. You know, the more salt you're flushing through. But to a degree, there comes a point where you can't drink enough water. You know what I mean, to flush that amount of salt.
Yeah, water falls to salt. So if the salt's there, the water's going to be retained because of that, because of the osmotic effect of the salt. Yeah. So Tanya was saying she drinks a lot of water and drinks a lot of salt, and then some doctors, like, that's the last resort, like, because doctors don't do lifestyle. They just say that's the one thing they can just say is to reduce your salt, right? And it'll get a third of the people. But it's just something to look out for. And some people have no problem at all. They can take in all that. And that person, his blood pressure was probably fine.
Not an issue. Problems at all, you know.
No problems.
And I'm sure he had incredible pumps in the gym, even when he was flat. You
know? For sure. So it's kind of a simple question, but I mean, you can get your blood work will tell you it would be very odd to go in and have low or high sodium levels, because it's so important for so many processes. But if you're in that range and like you're up at 10 grams of salt a day, it's like, okay, that's a good bit, but just to know, right? 20 grams is way too much, right? And like a gram total is probably too low of salt, right? So but there's a pretty wide range, and for the most part your thirst will cover you in terms of matching the sodium and the water. But there's that issue, like I said, when people get dehydrated, it just immediately it's an important, like, one of the first things when people talk about recovery is rehydrate, right? Hydration, carbohydrates. We're thinking protein synthesis, all that kind of stuff, but from an athletic performance, especially if someone's gonna, like this in a soccer tournament, they're gonna have to play multiple events, and they get dehydrated, and then they don't fully rehydrate afterwards, and they get dehydrated again, then eventually that starts impairing performance substantially.
For sure.
So acutely, hydration is super important.
How about this one from David? He says, question for old guys. I'm 50. Anyone else have to ditch the hack squat? They were my primary quad movement, but I just can't anymore. They wreck my quad tendons. I can do leg press, machine squats, back squats, pretty much anything else with no issues. Hacks leave me messed up for days with quad tendon pain. So not a good messed up, it sounds like.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what he means, pain here. So this is a good one to just kind of explore a little bit. So there's a quadriceps tendon that connects the quads to the patella, and then there's a patellar ligament that connects the patella, which is a sesamoid bone, right, to the tibia tuberosity. So one's actually a ligament because it's bone to bone, and then the tendon is from the muscle to the bone. So It doesn't, and I'd be surprised if he actually also has pain if he has patellofemoral pain under his patella. That's also a possibility. But my guess is that, and I've run into this, there's a lot of hack squats where the foot plate is pointed downward, so you're in plantar flexion.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You've seen this before, right? So
there's some terrible angles too.
There's some terrible angles,
you know.
Yeah, and those are the ones doing that, just like elevating your heels when you're squatting, or putting your feet out front where you have more plantar flexion. It changes the biomechanics and it makes it a more quad-focused exercise.
Yeah,
that's cool. But it also can be a knee wrecker because of that.
Yeah.
So, like I had someone mention this on the show. I have in one of the old videos from Battle for the Olympia with Dave Henry at my gym. I had a flex. I had the flex line of stuff, a hammer strength and flex.
Okay.
And the flex machines are awesome. But this particular hack squat was just like that. It was like, I mean, you got right in there and you no one ever did, but you felt like your feet were going to slide out. You know, it had a good grip tape, so it didn't ever happen, but it's like, wow. So I just built a platform. I went to Home Depot, got some wood, and I just, finagled it and tried it. I set it up so that I tried different angles until it felt right. And then I just secured the angle at that. So I had this giant wedge that I just put it there and I just threw it in there.
Huh.
And I didn't suggest everyone in the gym use that because liability-wise, it's not the best thing because in case it goes bad. But Dave and I used it for sure, and some of the other people who knew it was up to solve that problem. So basically, you could potentially find they make some wedges that are pretty solid that could be used for this kind of stuff. You could find a wedge to do that with.
Okay.
I've seen people, I'm not recommending this. I've done this, but I've seen people even take put plates or like a 2x4 just under the front part of their foot to change that angle. There's all sorts of ways you could sort of jimmy rig something to make that happen. But that's the issue really. Is there's just so much shear force on your knees, and it just the nature of that angle. So instead of having basically a perpendicular angle, a 90-degree angle between the direction in which the sled slides on the hack squat.
Yeah,
you've got a
more like
a more open angle. So one thing you can do is pre-fatigue the quads. So you use less weight.
Okay.
And that is a possibility. Positioning your feet differently sometimes can help too, and try to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. Higher, wider stance, maybe something.
Yeah,
like that.
whatever feels best. That sometimes people can go lower and but that makes it more quad dominant. But then you end up doing kind of like a sissy squat, like Tom Platz used to do. So you can just save it for that.
Yeah,
you've seen those, right? The Tom Platz sissy squats.
Oh yeah.
Where he's totally arches, butts off the pad, and all that kind of stuff. So
my back hurts just thinking about it sometimes.
Yeah, well, he's so light. There's a really good video with John Meadows. He has John doing that.
Oh yeah. I saw those.
He's got 25 pounds on the bar, something like that. It's like nothing, Yeah. But because of it's all quad, if you can get away with that, that would be a possible way to keep the hack squat in the rotation. And then it might be. There could be some, depending on really where the pain is with him, but potentially he has his quads are tight. I would, it's not a bad idea to just get good quad flexibility. So I'm not saying stretching is going to fix the tendonitis if that's what he has per se, but if there is some mistracking going on there, then you have some more degrees of freedom when you've got better flexibility. You don't want to intentionally stretch out your quad your patellar ligament per se. But that might help. And doing I've noticed actually in this particular case that when especially warming up seemed to help. Doesn't fix the biomechanical things per se, but it did seem to help. So I think it can help. Generally, people have tendonitis; they warm up better and they don't have pain when they're training. But also stretching the quads out really well seems like it's something that can help with that. You'd have to test it out. I wouldn't go do that and say, well, now I can just throw caution to the wind and do as many of these hack squats as I want. I think I'll be fine.
And hey, I'll throw something else out there. Is just the thing that we're so good at in bodybuilding is also the thing that we are so terrible at. We figure out what works really good, you know, and like hack squats were like his thing for a long time.
Yeah.
And guess what? Maybe they're just not your thing anymore. Maybe it is the machine. Maybe you can figure out a new way to use it. But like he said, he can back squat. So it's not like he's got problems.
Right.
You know, what else do you have? Maybe he gets on a pendulum and he's like, oh my God, I've never felt my quad activation. You know what I'm saying? There's like, we'll keep riding something out because it worked so well for us. But key being that's the past tense, worked so well. You know, what works now? You know, figure that out and embrace it then. Embrace the new awesome. Embrace the new awesome, Scott.
There you go. Sounds like a good bumper sticker.
Yeah.
But, you know, the thing too is maybe he can get away with them every couple weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You know, so as long as he doesn't try to do them every week, right? Or, you know, he's got probably, if it's his primary quad exercise, he's probably really strong at them too. So the idea of pre-fatiguing or maybe doing it at the end of the workout when he's warmed up, that might allow him to do that exercise and keep doing it. He'll have to drop his weight down, but that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're still getting, because I'm not going to go into all of this, but, you know, you still can get a hypertrophic stimulus because your activation is very, very high. It's maximal. You've got effective reps, so to speak, and the load is lower. You can go really low on the low. We know this from blood flow restriction studies or high rep studies. You can create a hypertrophic stimulus even though you don't have maximal weights on the bar or on the machine in this case. So he can still get that good stimulus that exercise lends itself to for him in particular if he does it at the end of the workout when he's using lighter loads, as long as he's still training hard. And he may just have to like do it less often.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
How about this one? You got this in email. So this is a summary basically of the question you got in email.
Yeah.
I'm following a training day, high carb day of 3,500 calories, peri post workout, non-training day of 3,000 calories, low carb approach. On training days, what should the fat amount in my AM meals, how much? 2, should I go by ratio of fat carbs on training days? And 3, how would I progress the macros when in an off-season improvement season?
So this training day, non-training day dietary approach is a place I start with lots of people, or I have to when I work with people. It's just we come up with something. It just makes a lot of sense. It's an easy way to follow stuff.
It's the first change I'll do. I don't the first week, but then we'll see where they're at, and if we needed less or needed more, then I know, well, let's add more on training day, or let's take away less on non-training, and then we go from there. So I'm
exactly. Yeah. So I mean, the one lens to use to look at is that training days, you got your stimulus, you're matching your caloric intake to your expenditure on that day, and the turnover that you're providing the protein and energy to drive the growth. If you're in an off season, you don't want to be in a deficit during your non-training days, but when you're dieting down, your non-training days could be a deficit day, and you might be the days that you're getting more fat loss because you have a caloric deficit during that 24-hour period. It's not quite that simple, but that's kind of the idea. Anyway, so this first question on the training day: what should or would the fat amount be in my AM meals? And how much? So in this strategy that he's doing. And this was somewhere else in the email. I don't know if I included this in the questions, but he's got carbohydrates primarily on the training day to refuel glycogen, and then he'd have higher fat amounts and lower carb amounts, so a low carb approach on the non-training days. So a simple way to do that, let's say you train, let's say you just train at noon, his AM meals. He could just to keep it as simple as possible, keep your AM meals the same on the non-training day as they are on the training day in those AM meals before you train. So if you've got X grams of protein, fat, and carbs on your 5 or 6 meals on the non-training day, you just use that exact same ratio. Basically, it could be the exact same foods if you wanted to in the pre-workout AM meals. Don't make it complicated. The one exception would be is that the meal right before you train, if you're going to use intra-workout with lots of carbs and you've gotten to the point where putting a lot of your calories in that peri and post-workout period, that you wouldn't want to have a lot of fat in that pre-workout meal so you don't have any digestive issues, because that can happen when you're training hard and you're taking an intra-workout during your training session. So the first morning meal might be the same as on the non-training day. Then you might just have a protein-only meal in the meal preceding to make sure you've got plenty of protein in those throughout your day and in those meals. So you've got sort of a protein spacing approach. This is how I would do it. But it could be, like I always say, like one of the things that John Meadows would suggest people do, or has had people do, is have some nut butter in the pre-workout meal, because that will meter in your glucose.
Yeah.
My approach is that you just meter in the glucose by metering in the glucose by drinking your shake during the workout, so you don't have to worry about that so much. But that's a security blanket to have, so that you don't end up being hypoglycemic if you drink all your drink at the beginning, what have you.
Right.
And then he asked about a ratio, and I think ratios are kind of worthless, to be honest. I mean, you can have a ratio.
I didn't have a ratio. I was interested to hear what you had to say if you had a ratio.
Yeah, I don't have a ratio. You can see people have set up like ketogenic diets with ratios.
Yeah.
In the past and that sort of thing, but the ratios are going to change. So.
Right.
And everything is going to change. Like there's one most important thing. There's no one size fits all for this. So some people do really well with high fat meals that digest them really well, and some people not so much.
Yeah.
So, but if the basic approach, just in general for setting up a diet, would, in the resistance in the bodybuilding context, is make sure you get your protein in, figure out what your calories are going to be. That's this is sort of building the pyramid from the bottom up. And then you may have a carb-fat balance. You want to make sure you get essential fat intake taken care of. But on training days, if you're taking more carbs, then you're going to make sure you get some fats on that day. You could not even have fats on that day. In this case, he's talking about having fats in the morning. And to get your calories, the rest of it's just carbs. As you go, and this is the next question, but as you go over time, let's say you've got X amount of fat in your first and maybe your second meal, and then you go to carbs mainly for the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. As you start adding calories, the easiest place to do that is with carbs for many, many people. And this is the approach that I used in that peri and post-workout period. Your ratio is going to change. You wouldn't necessarily say, like, I need to throw some fat in there, especially if you're taking in lots of carbs, because that fat makes it difficult for people to bring in carbs. Unless you're like in a shitload situation, or a skip load situation, perhaps, where someone has been in a deficit for days on end and their body's ready to soak up all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But the ratio is going to change. It's going to be all over the place. So sticking that ratio, it's an unnecessary constraint, I think, because that's on a day-to-day basis, and it means somehow you have to fill in a macronutrient to keep the ratio in place, where it may not fit, like with the scenario that you're in metabolically, when you're trying to refill glycogen if you're doing a high volume training regime or what have you. You don't need to have fat per se in there.
Right.
There is something to say for refilling intramuscular triglyceride, but fats and carbs together a lot of times are a recipe for gastrointestinal distress.
Yeah.
So the third question, the way I generally do this is, First order of business would keep that non-training day the same, keep it as simple as possible, keep the pre-workout meals the same, add to the peri-workout and post-workout window.
This is for progressing macros.
This is for, exactly the third. Yeah, I'm looking at my list, so you don't have the question up. But
I do. I just was reiterating because we hadn't mentioned it since we asked the question.
I got you. I wasn't sure if it was on the screen still.
No.
Yeah, so the third question is, how would I progress the macros when in off-season, improvement season?
Yeah.
So first, peri, post-workout. This is what I generally and fill that up until that's getting to where that's about all I can get in here, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And then you have different choices. So if you've got, like, let's say he's gone from 3,000 on non-training days to 4,500, right? And on non-training days he's pretty hungry, right? And on training days he's absolutely full. Well, in that scenario, and the general approach I will look at is, think about where are the meals on whichever days of the week where you can most easily add food. Mm-hmm. So when am I the most hungry, or when am I the least full?
Yeah.
So even in that post-workout period, you might have a peri-workout and then let's say 3 meals during that day, right, thereafter. And you're thinking, like, where do I add the carbs? Well, that last meal of the day, I'm just stuffed. But the first meal after my peri-workout shake, I can add food. So that's where you add it.
Yeah.
And you ride that for a while, watch happens, and then you say, okay, can we add in, are any of those meals available? It's like, well, now the second meal, post-workout meal, I can add some food there. That one feels like I can add. So you do that until those are all kind of filled up. And then you think, okay, where else can I best add food? Probably if you're satisfied, you're not hungry on the day of training, leave that alone because you've already maxed out the post-workout period. And those meals early then will impact how filling those other meals are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But on your non-training day, this is why the no fat and the pre-workout meal makes sense sometimes. But on non-training days, you might have multiple meals where you could add to all of them or add to particular meals. Like for some reason, like I'm just starving come dinner time. It's like, okay, well, we could add there. But if you're so starving you can't think well at work and perform, then you should probably have more meal in your lunchtime meal or the meal before that. Yeah. So you add, and then you just watch, pay attention where your body suggests is the best place to add those meals, based on all, and that allows you to, without having to do any bizarre calculus, just listen to what your body's telling you is the place to add a meal.
Yeah.
And that's generally how I would do it. And over time, and the other thing that's kind of a cool little, and more people are doing this, but I figured this out a long time ago, and there's actually there's some literature looking at this, but there's a circadian rhythm that you can take advantage of too. And it works sort of in both directions. So if let's say you get into that like situation where your non-training days are 3,000 calories, your training days are 45, that's a pretty huge gap, right?
Right.
One approach, if you're kind of unsure, is add meals on the non-training day during the same time when you're taking in lots of calories on the training day, so that throughout the week, like all 7 days of the week, in the afternoon or at the nighttime, the later part of the day, you're taking in more calories. And what that does is entrains an ebb and flow of caloric intake throughout all days of the week. So that what happens is people add more food at that time on the non-training days. Yeah. Their body is now getting used to, midday or second half of the day, I'm getting lots of calories. And then they can then start adding to the post-workout period. Yeah. Because the body is entraining itself to take in lots of calories in the second half of the day.
Interesting. That's something I hadn't thought of before. I like that.
Yeah, it works really well. It works kind of amazing because it's like, okay, so we've gone from X number of calories per week. Now we've taken the non-training days, and it's now at 3,500. The training days at 4,500. And all of a sudden you have more room on the training. After you've done that for a couple of weeks, month, you've got more room on the training days to add calories because you're setting a consistent pattern, circadian rhythm on a daily basis to keep the calories, more calories are coming in. And then people all of a sudden are hungry again. Yeah, give it a shot. I would love to hear back, but that works remarkably well. It doesn't seem like it's another trick,
Yeah.
And that's how, I think that's like, I don't know how I figured this out initially, but people totally get used to like not having any breakfast, right?
They do.
Or you get used to intermittent fasting, like you adapt to that, right? Yeah. But you take someone who's used to having meals like every three hours, and many bodybuilders are going to resonate with this, and all of a sudden you miss one of those meals, you're friggin' dying. It's like, oh my God, like what the hell? Yeah. Because your body is adjusted to all of that. It's not like all of a sudden you haven't had any food for weeks on end. You've just fallen out of that pattern. So you can create the pattern and impose the pattern so that your body then is ready. It seems like this is just sort of my armchair hypothesis here, is that your body is then ready for more food at that time of the day because you're sending a consistent signal that more food is going to be there available, and be ready for it because it's there. So take it on, and it's another approach that works pretty well. So
I love it.
Yeah, those are my thoughts on that. It's pretty simple, really. It's not.
I learn something every episode.
Oh, cool. Oh, cool.
Hey, I was looking at Google Scholar on MK677, and there is, I think, new research since we had talked about it. It was probably close to like almost not quite a decade, but it was closer to a decade than not being a decade.
Really? Yeah, more than 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a good while, man, since we had talked about it. I was just looking to see if there was anything new, relevant stuff that I could shoot over to you. But then I started thinking this too. I was like, even if it is getting more popularity, are we really that interested in it that I'd want to send it over to you and dig into it? I don't know. I guess we could ask the people, are you guys that interested in learning about MK677? I feel like there's a lot of other things that are worth digging into instead,
It's important in that lots of people keep on using it because you don't have to inject it, you just swallow it. It's an easy one.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be the case. The route of administration makes things relevant because the easier it is to get it in, the more people want to use it. Yeah, even if it's silly to do so. I'm not saying it's silly per se, but...
Yeah. I saw studies on older people and bone health, younger people and muscle growth and fat loss. I saw a study that had to do with improving sleep quality after having used it for a period of time. So there's a bunch of different stuff that was being done on it. But you guys tell us, what do you want to hear about? Okay. And leave us questions for the next show. And go over to byobbcoach.com, or you can click the link to eBay down below in the description, and you can get Scott's book there. He'll autograph it for you, and some of the proceeds are going to go to the ASPCA for dogs. We all love dogs. You love dogs. I love dogs. We all love dogs. And, of course, dogs are family. What did it say at the bottom?
Dogairs.com.
Okay.
Yeah. I bought this years ago.
It's just a nice shirt.
It speaks my mind.
And, of course, we're brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. I'm going to leave here to go place my order right now because I got to get some collagen. I got to get some protein for the wife. And I'm sure there's a couple other things I need. Use our code THINK over there to get some additional savings. And, of course, it's like voting for our podcast. Everybody has codes for every company and site out there nowadays, but if you use our code THINK, it's like voting for us. And supplementsource.ca for Canadians. They already have really good deals. They don't have any codes over there, but you can tell them that we said hi. And, of course, thank you to Patreon. We had some Patreon questions. Load us up with more Patreon questions for Scott and all the other podcasts. And, guys, for another episode of Muscle Minds, we'll see you soon. Thank you, Scott, as always.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Adios.